So he couldn't afford to keep me in Nuremberg. He brought me home. My sister stayed because the girls' dormitory was much less expensive. I was now 12 years old. I had to go to school somewhere. There were no Jewish schools. So every morning, I and maybe a dozen other Jewish kids from the whole area would gather in someone's home in a nearby little town. No teacher, no textbooks. We would just keep each other company out of trouble for maybe 3 or 4 hours, and then go back home again. So one morning I was having breakfast before catching my 7 o'clock train, having my rolls and butter, and all of a sudden a brick came flying through the window. And then another, and before I knew it, every window in the house was being smashed in. And I quickly got up and ran upstairs to my mom and dad, who got up and got dressed quickly. And as I passed the front door, they were smashing in the front door. And I ran upstairs, and we heard them breaking down the front door. And my dad says, "Come on, let's go hide in this closet." And we hid in the closet upstairs while we heard several men, maybe 6 or 7 men, making terrible noises downstairs, like they were smashing furniture and glassware and stuff. And we were just waiting for them to come up to get us. My dad says, "Don't make a sound. If they come up, maybe they won't look in the closet. Just don't make a sound." And we were petrified. They must have had sticks or something down there, smashing things. They must have been crazed. It was a horrible time, but after a few minutes, the noise stopped, and they left. They never came upstairs. They never touched us. And we waited just to make sure that they wouldn't come back. And when we went downstairs, we found the place was in shambles. They'd smashed our furniture and china and glassware, and it was just a mess. And my mother was terribly upset. It was her pride and joy. And she and I started to clean up, while my dad, who was a very religious man, went into one of the rooms to do his daily morning prayers. Only on that day he had special reason to be very thankful that we were not harmed, that we were not touched. And suddenly there was a knock on that broken front door. And I went to answer. There was the mayor of the town and the chief of police. "You want to see Mr. Hubert? Right away." And they marched in. And I got my dad out from the room. And the chief of police said, "Mr. Hubert, you are under arrest. You will come with us." Now, if this were to happen here in New York, in your house, police comes in and says to your dad or to your brother, "You're under arrest." What do you think the first thing your dad would say?
What's the charge?
What's the charge? What do you think the second thing he might want to do?
Resist.
Get a lawyer.
Call a lawyer. Exactly. But my dad didn't do either of those things. Why? Because at this point, my dad knew, we knew, and the police knew that the police, the Nazis, could do with Jews whatever they wanted. The Jews had no legal rights. They could arrest you, they could kill you, they could do anything they want. You were only a Jew. Didn't count. Vermin, they called it. The only crime my father ever committed in his entire life was that he was born a Jew. And that was enough reason to be arrested by the Nazis. And to call a lawyer? Jewish lawyers had been forbidden to practice law since the Nuremberg laws, years before. And to call a non-Jewish lawyer to defend a Jew against the government? You must be kidding. Nobody. They would laugh at you. And to resist the chief of police, who had a revolver at his side, who would not hesitate to shoot you without ever being questioned about it. The only option my dad had was to put on his jacket, say goodbye to my mother and me, and walk out with the chief of police and the mayor. And as they left, the mayor turned around at the door and said, and by the way, you will clear out of this village in 7 weeks. I want this village to be Judenrein, which means free of Jews. And with that, they disappeared. And my mom and I stood there absolutely frozen in shock. The whole thing took a few minutes. My God, what would happen to my dad being arrested? What would happen to us? The house is smashed in windows and doors. What happened? What we didn't know at the time was that what was happening in our house and to my dad was happening to every other Jewish home in the village and to every other Jewish home throughout Germany and Austria. It was Crystal Night, 1938, 9th November 1938, the night of the broken glass, where the German started a physical pogrom against the Jews by smashing in homes, arresting men, setting synagogues ablaze with orders for the fire department not to put out those flames. Let those synagogues burn. That was the order from on high. Jewish stores were ransacked. And afterwards, the German government made the Jewish population pay for the damages and for the cleanup. Make them pay for what the Nazis did. The day after my dad was arrested, our neighbor waited till it was dark and then knocked at the window. She didn't want to come in the house. She was afraid to be seen. And told my mother that she had seen my dad, among other men, being loaded into a freight train in the nearby town, and the destination of that cattle car was Dachau, the most notorious concentration camp near Munich. It had a reputation of mistreating its inmates, and some were never heard from again. Now we were really petrified. My mom and I decided, let's try and get my father out of concentration camp by going to the American consulate in Stuttgart, because the house that we had to sell if we had to leave the village belonged half to my dad and half to his brother, who was an American citizen in New York. And they had given us papers, or they had started with affidavits for us to immigrate to the United States. So we thought if we get to the American consulate, tell them our story, they would A, get my dad out of the concentration camp so he would sell the house, and B, give us an okay to immigrate to the United States.